with Rachel V. Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
Well, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't expecting to be hopping on at 2:30 in the afternoon, but the news is finally official. The Broncos are releasing quarterback Russell Wilson. News we already knew, let's be honest, Broncos country. But when was we officially going to get the word? James Marilat, even I were just talking about this on Friday, and he was saying, I'm going on the Friday 5 p.m. news drop. And I was saying, no, it's going to happen earlier. Yet here we are on this Monday. Huge news. I was excited because I want to get your guys' perspectives in the comments, and I always love hearing it. I've got Jake Shapiro here. He's writing stuff over at denversports.com. We are taking in the news literally as it is coming in. Russell Wilson also having essentially his goodbye that he's posted. And it goes on to say, Broncos country, thank you. Over these last 2 years, you have welcomed my family with me with open arms and have embraced us as members of the Denver community. This city will always hold a special place in my heart. Our family grew here. We made countless memories and friendships and formed relationships that will last a lifetime. He obviously goes on and on and on. And he said, tough times don't last, but tough people do. God's got me. I am excited for what is next. Sorry, some small writing on that front. But here we are, Jake. And essentially, Russell Wilson does move on. I was actually just saying, it was Cecil Lammy, Jake, and I, and we were all in the boardroom that we have, and we just got done with our weekly meeting. And I told him I'm actually a little emotional about this because this was so much hope for Broncos country when they signed him 2 years ago. We were all so excited about what was going to happen. Even the past season when Sean Payton was coming in, he was going to fix Russell Wilson. There's been so much hope with him, and the chapter comes to an end. And even though we already knew that, it still just kind of feels like this, oh my gosh, moment. So Jake, I'm curious to get your thoughts on it too, because I know a lot of people probably feel this way.
Yeah, you have to go back to Russ's time in Seattle. He was inarguably the most electric quarterback in the league at the peak of his game. He went to 2 Super Bowls. He won one against the Broncos. He was awesome, and let Russ cook in the fourth quarter and him scrambling out of the pocket was fantastic. And we finally thought, hey, Denver has a quarterback for the first time since really the penultimate year of Peyton Manning here in Denver. And now we are back to where we started and probably in a worse position. I mean, it's crazy to think, Rachel, that the team, let alone the trade, which we can get into, but they gave $250 million to this guy who didn't play a single game on that $250 million contract.
Which opens up the comments already. Fire George Payton right now, like this instant. What a joke of a contract extension. Fire George Payton next. We would have drafted a QB. Would have been nice to have our rookie sit behind Russ for a year. But yes, a lot of people finally just being kind of fed up with George Payton, and rightfully so. This is an embarrassing contract. This may be one of the worst contracts ever in sports. It may be number one. It's most definitely the number one in Broncos history. He didn't even play a single snap of the contract extension. That's insanity right there.
Yeah, and now they're going to have to eat about $85 million of money. Rachel, I'm going to do some research, and I'll get a story up later today on what exactly that number looks like compared to some of the other contracts in NFL history and sports history and how bad it just is. I mean, for now, all we need to know is it's bad and it damages the Broncos moving forward. There is obviously a forward angle, but just before we do that, let's just even go back the last 2 years, because you could argue that 2022 was maybe the most embarrassing Broncos season of all time, hiring Nathaniel Hackett. At first, maybe we thought Aaron Rodgers was going to come here. Same day, we find out Aaron Rodgers isn't going to come here. Russ comes here. Yep. He's finally maybe the answer to a team with a good defense, some good skill guys. Tim Patrick gets hurt in the first training camp. The contract gets signed. We think Russ is going to be here for 7 years. And he comes out in Seattle, looks pretty good. We're like, okay, good.
Maybe some nerves are playing into it. This was a big moment.
He led them on a potentially fourth quarter game-winning drive, but a terrible decision by Nathaniel Hackett and a missed kick by McManus kind of underscored what was going to come next. And what came next was the worst offense maybe in Denver Broncos history, especially given the era of football that that had happened in. And it was just such a bad season. And then you have the embarrassment on Christmas Day. And then you go into this year with Sean, who you've traded more assets to come here and fix Russ. doesn't happen. And by the end of the season, you've got a labor dispute with the union over your star quarterback about what you're going to do with his cut date. And now you are down on draft assets. You're down on cap space. You don't have a quarterback, and you don't really have a team around him because you missed the window of that team because this quarterback did not succeed. So the Broncos are back from not even starting at 0, but below 0. Fortunately, this decision, maybe the day of it comes as a shock, but this decision has been months in the making, and the Broncos have been preparing for it, and they seem to have a clear plan going forward, which I appreciate because in the past couple of years, at times it seems reactionary, not planned out.
No, I agree. And yes, I do think that there is a plan in place now. Essentially, George Payton and head coach Sean Payton released a statement from the Denver Broncos and said, "We spoke with Russell Wilson today to inform him of his release after the start of the league year." Also, real quick, I'm going to butt in on that part. Do we think that they called him, or do you think that Russ came into the building? Because I'm 100% going phone call.
That was a phone call.
Yeah.
Not even a FaceTime, not even a Zoom link.
If you know you're getting fired, I'm like, no, just tell it to me right now. Perfect. 30-second conversation. We hang up. We go separate ways.
Well, obviously, I mean, there is the scenario in which he found out from Schefter releasing it or the Broncos news release
he had
itself.
That thank you.
But he
so
could have
fast.
done that before because he knew, I mean, his house has been not on the market, but they've been listening.
Yeah. Been taking some tours.
Right. So they knew, Rachel. Like, they knew. This isn't a surprise for anyone involved. And now Russ is going to have to find a new home. Obviously, the worst way this plays out is the Broncos don't have a quarterback, are continuing the long search that teams like the Cleveland Browns and Chicago Bears have been on, where they don't find his quarterback. And what if Russ goes to the Raiders and finds a way to rejuvenate himself and find a way to be the quarterback that he once was, playing on almost zero salary because of the Broncos are paying his salary? There's a scenario in which this looks even worse for the Broncos a year from now. But even today, you could make the case that it was not only the worst trade in NFL history, but the worst contract in NFL history and 2 of the worst seasons in Broncos history.
Which leads back to the point that everybody in the comments is already talking about. Why the heck does George Payton still have a job at this point? Do you see a release for the GM of the Denver Broncos as soon as the draft is over?
Yeah, that's when it would have to come, Rachel. You would let George go through the draft. We kind of talked about it last year. We thought it might come after last year's draft. At this point, Sean Payton's really running the team, and George Payton is kind of, doing some of the stuff on the roster that's akin to mopping and sweeping the floors, right? It's not necessarily the glamour work of assembling the furniture and deciding where the couch is going to go. It's just cleaning up the roster. So I actually wouldn't be surprised to see George still here, but the roster George assembled even before Sean got here is embarrassing. It's a joke. And it's not just the Russ trade. There's almost no talent on this roster. It's not close to being a playoff team. Those 5 games maybe were a mirage in the middle of the season and potentially holds the Broncos back from getting a quarterback this year in the draft that they could have won, because it takes them out of really the prime quarterback positions outside of the top 10. So everything that could have gone wrong the last 2 years to even losing not enough games this past season has gone the exact wrong way for the Broncos. And I think that's the way I'll remember the Russ era, is nothing went right. And remember, Rachel, let's ride.
Let's ride. Let's ride. We look back, and I've noticed a lot of people recently have been having this discussion that the Denver Broncos sold their soul for for Super Bowl 50. And we know that there are ebbs and flows and ups and downs when it comes to trying to win a championship. But to me, the two aren't connected. And I don't know if you feel that way, right? Like, they had the draft picks that they gave up for Russell Wilson. They had the draft picks that they gave up for Sean Payton. So it doesn't feel like this all happened because they gave up their soul for Super Bowl 50. And I've just found that to be a really interesting argument that has got brought up a lot more as of recent.
Yeah, I don't see the connection either.
Yeah.
Especially now that we're a couple years into the future. There's no one left on this roster that is even on Super Bowl 50.
Yeah.
This roster. The only guy close is like Justin Simmons, who came in the year after. Really, the way they messed it up is the Paxton Lynch draft pick, and then again missing Josh Allen and Justin Fields in the drafts. So that's not really Super Bowl 50 related.
I agree.
It's just maybe there was a malaise in management after Super Bowl 50, but like, I don't really think that.
And even you look at management, it's totally different now.
Yeah. But like, even those years, management was kind of the same for a little bit of a portion of it. So yeah, I don't see the difference. But, if you want to say Russ came here to win championships, well, Denver did win 2 championships with Russ, just in hockey
Not
and
on the football
basketball.
field.
But he was there as a fan.
He was. Do we remember when he all got cheered and then they stopped showing him because he was getting booed and lots of stuff? Going back to some of your guys' comments as always, this is an interesting one too that a lot of people are bringing up. And the Broncos have raised ticket prices significantly the last 2 awful seasons. I know people are really frustrated, and it's just honestly what's happening a lot with the market. They were, I think, was it 7% that they raised? Jake, you might remember better than me. 7 or 8%, where we saw other teams raising them 14%. But pretty much every single team did raising their ticket prices. So it's all interesting.
Yeah, 7.9% was the average ticket price raise.
Yeah.
It's honestly not surprising. It's kind of the league average.
Right.
Unfortunately, raising ticket prices is not connected at all to team success in the NFL.
Agreed. It's just like your gallon of milk, how that raises. It's just part of the day-to-day.
Yeah, but I do have a warning for the Denver Broncos. Because we're here. I'm 28 years old.
Yep.
The Broncos won a Super Bowl when I was in college.
Yep.
For the people a little bit younger than me, the Broncos have already been irrelevant for an entire decade of their adolescence or formative years through high school, through college, young fandom when they might be going to games with friends, drinking beers, whatever. The Broncos are starting to get to a point with this future generation, Gen Z, where they're not one of the prized historic franchises in the NFL. They're going to be looked at like a joke. And unless they nail whoever's going to be their next quarterback and build a roster around them, there's a chance that the Broncos are more thought of like the Cleveland Browns to the next generation and the Jacksonville Jaguars than they are like the New England Patriots, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Dallas Cowboys. So my warning to the Denver Broncos is you have that sellout streak. A lot of people are interested in your ball club. No doubt. Denver still, goes on the knee for the Denver Broncos, and it makes sense. They're the kings of this town. They've had more success than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. But this new generation hasn't seen that success, and be careful with what's next, because this next generation is at risk of showing up to the stadium wearing Patrick Mahomes jerseys, even though they grew up in Denver, or showing up to the stadium and they're rooting for the Rockies because they're not showing up to Denver Broncos games anymore. So I just want to caution the Denver Broncos, because they are entering a territory in which fans start to get lost for generations.
Yeah.
And I've seen it with other sports teams, especially here with the Nuggets. I mean, how many Lakers fans do we both grew up in Colorado.
Yeah.
How many Lakers fans do we know and Kobe Bryant fans, because they were great here in Colorado when, the Nuggets weren't.
Yeah, no, I mean, trust me, I get it. And I'm just reading all of the comments, and it's so fascinating to see how many of you are taking this as like, what the heck were the Broncos doing thinking to release quarterback Russell Wilson? So many others are saying this is unbelievable. It took this long, yada, yada, to this point.
Let me ask you, Rachel, did they make the right move from moving on for Russ, or would you give him another year?
Oh, Jake, why did you have to ask me the toughest question in all of sports, it feels like right now here in Denver? I've been so critical of Russell Wilson, and I was so critical of everybody calling him a top 5 QB because the stats were showing all of this stuff. And yet when I was watching the games, I was like, this doesn't feel like a confident, competent offense. And yet I sit here and I said, I'm like, felt like all the hope was gone. And so I'm almost a little emotional today because, number 3 says goodbye and all of these things, and they had no success. But because of what Russell Wilson did in Seattle, I so badly wanted to believe that he could have done it. And so I've had many conversations on these couches right here where I'm sitting here and I'm like, maybe Russ did just need another insane running back, and maybe Javonte just couldn't be enough that they needed to really be able to move the offense, or maybe they did need a bigger tight end or somebody that could be a DK Metcalf for us. And I'm sitting there going, he just needed all these little pieces for the quarterback. But in fact, the quarterback who gets paid so much freaking money should be able to elevate all of these guys to be able to go out there and win. And yet I still sit here and I'm like, what if they would have had one more year with a better offensive line? What if they would have got some insane wide receiver out of the draft? Just what if? And I don't know the answer to that question, Jake, because I can feel both sides of it kind of pulling on me of like, I still have this hope for Russell Wilson, and I'm going to be really freaking pissed off if he goes and wins a championship somewhere else. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm going to be ticked if he does. But at the exact same time, I didn't want another year of what we already dealt with. And so I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, Russ won 11 games as a Bronco in his 2 years here.
God.
Would 36-year-old Russell Wilson in year 2 of Sean Payton have been better? And I wonder really where the talent is coming from. Yeah, maybe you use that 12th pick on a wide receiver or another offensive lineman. But you look at Russ. Statistically, he actually was basically an average quarterback this year, a league average quarterback. Everything but the sack rate was pretty much above or at league average.
Yeah.
And yet I would tell you, you would have incurred a larger cost by having Russ on the roster and then cutting him after next season because of that $85 million turns into $86 million of dead cap space. And it's another year down the road. So I think the time to move on from Russ was now, if you were going to do it in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I wasn't ready to commit to 36-year-old Russ and 37-year-old Russ, knowing what I saw out of 34 and 35-year-old Russ. We saw him as a big guy. We saw him as a skinny guy. Neither really worked for the Denver Broncos. So I thought this is absolutely the right move from the Broncos. I'm actually... I tip my cap to George Penner, Greg Penner, and George Payton and all the people there for actually making the courageous move and just deciding to eat the money and ripping the Band-Aid off.
Do we know that they're eating all of it in year one, or has that been announced yet? Obviously, this is all breaking, so we're trying to gather this information.
And what you're alluding to is they can eat $85 million all right now, or they can spread it about $40 million each year. This has not come out yet. Okay. This is going to be the big detail that tells us, hey, if they're eating $85 million right now, the Broncos are just going to be bad for 1 year. Yep. They're going to cut a bunch of guys. They're going to incur the cost, and they're going to bounce back in 2025 with a fury, Rachel.
Yeah.
But if they do it over 2 years, it's kind of like, well, we ripped the Band-Aid off, but doesn't need another Band-Aid. And do we want to be okay this year and then try to build? So I personally would rip the Band-Aid all the way off, just 100%. Suck for a year and cure the cap hit. I wouldn't draft a quarterback at 12, Rachel. I would probably go offensive tackle or wide receiver. And I'd go Shedeur Sanders.
Oh
in
my
2025.
God. No, of course the buff would say this. Of course he would say this. So which quarterback are you looking at then? If you are so you're saying you're not going through the draft at all, or are you taking somebody in like the second round, like a Rattler or whatever?
Yeah, I think you would take a chance on maybe someone who was successful in college, like Hartman, or I really like Spencer Pratt. But ultimately, I would look at it kind of like Washington did all those years ago, where they drafted RG3 to be their star and then Kirk Cousins to be their backup. Yeah. Maybe I'm drafting my backup for the future in this year's draft, and I'm drafting my quarterback for the future in next year's draft. There are some really good quarterback prospects, and I know like we're about to do the 2024 draft, so it sucks to be talking 2025. But like I have legitimately more hope in Shedeur Sanders or Quinn Ewers at the top of next year's draft than I do in JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, which are kind of where the Broncos are going to be.
Well, it's just crazy the fact that so many teams need quarterbacks right now. So we're hearing talks that JJ McCarthy, who before the combine was like, a few weeks ago, second round quarterback type thing. Well, now because of his combine, they're saying you have to move up into the top 5 to get JJ McCarthy. Let's be honest. His rating is really a second round QB. Like, let's not try and be desperate here. I get we all want to move on. I get we want to find the quarterback of the future, but let's not be desperate.
Yeah, and that's been the Broncos' problem this whole time, Rachel. Let me lay out this scenario.
Wait, real quick. Yeah. I've never seen so many people in the comment section being like, they should have blew this entire thing up back in 2016 and we wouldn't be in this situation. Yes. And I feel like that's exactly where you're going to lead to.
They should have blown it up in the past. But let me just lay out this scenario. Let's say they didn't panic trade for a quarterback or panic draft a quarterback, which they've done, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 times that they've gone through this process. Let's just say they wrote it out for another year with Teddy and Drew.
Yep.
Not that fun, not that exciting, no doubt. But neither was the alternative, was it? I mean, there was a name attached to it, and he sold a lot of jerseys. A lot of you guys spent a lot of money on jerseys that you're going to throw away.
Sad day.
It wasn't that great. So let me lay this out. If you had just go run it back with Teddy and Drew, save the cap space, save the draft assets, who became available that summer as a free agent? Now league MVP, Lamar Jackson.
Oh,
the Broncos could have Lamar Jackson right now as their quarterback if they had just waited it out. Previously, they could have had Kirk Cousins as their quarterback if they had just waited it out. So I am someone that believes you should build your team, build as good of a roster as you possibly can, and eventually a quarterback will become available, and you just have to nail which quarterback becomes available. Because despite what many people believe, almost every offseason, there's 1 to 2 quarterbacks that are legitimate that come available, whether it's through the draft or through free agency. You just got to nail which one. And the Broncos have been panicking to try and grasp onto something. And even going back to Peyton Manning, Rachel, How did they get Payton? They had the roster in place, and then they got Payton. So that is the strategy. Look at the Jets.
But what's crazy is for so many years, Broncos country was so blind to it and saying, all we need is the quarterback. All we need is the quarterback. And then they plugged and played a few quarterbacks, and it was like, oh no, these aren't the quarterbacks. So yeah, eventually you have to kind of look at the room and say, all right, we're clearly not just missing a quarterback. We're now missing a lot of things. And I'm seeing people who are saying, restructure this contract, restructure this contract. You could have kept Russ and done this or this or this, whatever it is. Regardless, they're moving on from Russell Wilson. We'll look ahead to the future. And I just really want to talk about this because I know people are at work and probably chilling, and we appreciate you guys all hanging out. Please let us know in the comments how you're feeling. Russell Wilson's future. If we would have gone 2 years ago where we were, it was crazy to think he could lead us to Super Bowls. Now we're talking about Russell Wilson. People are saying him coming out of the combine. There's no team that's interested in Russell Wilson. And the number one team he's been connected to is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And at The Athletic's Diana Rossini reports earlier today that the Steelers are not interested in any of the veteran quarterbacks out there. That includes Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, or Russell Wilson. Is it possible that Russell Wilson can come out of this entire thing and not land on a team?
Yeah, I wrote about what's next for Russell Wilson on denversports.com right before we came on air, published that story. The Steelers are still the strong favorites to get Russell Wilson. And obviously the Raiders, Falcons, and Patriots, all the familiar faces, are going to be into Russ. I would definitely take a chance on Russ because he's going to be a league minimum contract. He's a guy that's proven it before. And if Andy Dalton can be on a roster in 2024 and, Blaine Gabbert and these guys, Russ can definitely be on a roster. The question is, and I'm a basketball guy, when Russell Westbrook was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, he wasn't ready to humble himself from that star level to being a bench player. When he got cut by the Lakers and joined the Clippers, he was ready to humble himself and be a bench guy. So can Russ humble himself after this situation and be, okay, I'm going to go in and have to compete for a job, and maybe I'm not going to be a star quarterback. I'm just going to be a game manager. Can Russ fill that role? Is he ready for that, or is he going to need more time to get there? I think that's one of the most interesting questions about the Russell Wilson side of this moving forward.
Well, Andrew Mason just put out this tweet not long ago. Russell Wilson is responsible for 2 of the 5 largest dead money cap hits in NFL history. The Denver Broncos, obviously the $85 million, but then with the Seahawks for $26 million. First of all, everyone needs to hire Russell Wilson's agent because he can definitely get you paid whether you're playing or you're not going to be playing.
So I've got more breaking news to add to this, and this is the part that's going to be big for the Broncos moving forward. Mike Kliss reporting Broncos to split Wilson's dead cap hit over 24 and 25. No. It could be 35.4 and 24 and 49.6 and 25. Or they could do it 53 this year and 32 the following year. So there's a way in which they pay a lot of the piper now and still reserve some of it. But either way, they're not going to take the bullet and just be horrible this year.
And I was kind of really hoping that they, in fact, would just bite the bullet and be horrible. And that way we can all just move on, right? I feel like this Russell Wilson stuff is going to linger for so long. And so I'm just like, all right, let's be done with this situation. Let's just get Russell Wilson out of our system. Let's be done. But definitely I'm leaning towards pay that $53 million up front and then pay the rest of it in 2025. You're still going to be probably rough this year. Let's be completely honest. They are going to have to either draft a quarterback or get a really cheap quarterback to come in. I'm going to be interested to see how many of the next few weeks deals are restructured and what that's going to look like now when it comes to Russell Wilson. There's going to be plenty of stuff going on at denversports.com. So I want to read just a few more of your guys' questions because we appreciate you giving us all of your insight. And again, it still seems like all of the comments are about fire George Payton, please and thank you. Good decision. Spread it. People are happy that the Broncos are moving on from Russell Wilson. I feel like this comment right here will forever encapture a lot of what Russell Wilson was to the Denver Broncos. Here comes another hype video. He will forever be remembered for the hype videos, and that's how we essentially all knew that the Broncos were, in fact, going to move on from Russell Wilson. He started posting the hype videos again. Sean Payton had said that we were done doing all of the social media stuff. We saw very rarely any videos coming out of Russell Wilson and his camp until a few weeks ago. And yes, they indeed did return. Reading some more of your comments. I just want to check it out. Ooh, well, congratulations, Broncos. Welcome the warm embrace from the basement of the NFL for at least the next 5 years.
Oof.
Okay, Jake, Is that a true statement? Do you believe that this is going to hurt the Broncos for at least the next 5 years? My biggest thing is the Denver Broncos have already given up so much.
Right. So they're
first round. Don't move up for a quarterback.
Right. So it depends on how they react to this. Do they dig themselves a deeper hole? And by splitting the cap over 2 years, the cap hit, it kind of indicates that they are willing to, try to dig themselves a deeper hole to be competitive right away, which makes sense based on Sean Payton's personality. But I am someone who thinks that if they do move up and they miss on a quarterback this year, then yeah, obviously they're going to be 5 years in the hold. Let's say, Rachel, even if they nail the quarterback right now, let's say they just get the top quarterback somehow. He falls to 12. They don't even move up. It's like the Mahomes thing over, but the Broncos have him. It's at 12, right? Obviously, no one's going to be as good as Mahomes, but he's an elite quarterback. Whoever they get at 12. You're not going to be able to take advantage of the rookie scale contract, which is the biggest hack in the NFL, because you're paying basically the allotment of a quarterback to Russell Wilson to not play for your team. So the talent around that rookie wage scale, awesome quarterback, that's a hypothetical, which if you nail it, could turn out. The talent around him isn't as good as the other rookie quarterbacks we've seen in recent history, like a Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago. So I think the Broncos, again, they've limited their window, even if they nailed a quarterback, to basically just years 3 and 4 of that quarterback.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. I'm just reading some more of your guys' comments. Also, I love how many the Seahawks fans are in the comments being like, we told you guys about Russell Wilson. We told you. What did we say about Russell Wilson? Nobody listened.
I tweeted after the second Broncos game that the Russell Wilson contract has a chance to look worse than Chris Bryant's. I was right away. I hated the trade. I thought it was a mistake.
You hated the trade?
Yeah, I hated the trade. I hated the contract.
The contract extension, everybody was like, what the heck are we doing? I
remember it a little differently. I mean, me and Mike Evans, I felt like we're a little bit alone on an island, but I'll have you back on my island.
No, I remember thinking, because it was the same thing with MPJ. When they signed MPJ's contract extension, I was like, what the heck are we doing? Because he had back surgery, and now it's like 2 weeks later. I remember thinking the same thing with Russ of like, you guys, there's still so much time. And we were starting to hear all the rumblings about like, Seattle fans really disliked him. And there was a bunch of stuff, but we were all kind of blinded, right? We were like, Super Bowls, playoffs, whatever it could be. But I wasn't thrilled about that. The trade, I was all in on. I could not believe it was happening.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back and look at that trade now, it's pretty rough, Rachel. Like,
it's so bad.
Broncos got Russ, and then
do you think Shelby Harris and like Noah Fant and everybody are just laughing right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of Russ's former teammates are laughing away. I mean, look at the way Richard Sherman and Marshawn Lynch treat Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was a pariah to some of his teammates, and some others loved him. But I guess, there are people in this world that are loved and hated. I have no problem with Russ. I think he's probably a pretty decent guy based off of the way his personality is, what he's doing for his children. And, maybe I wouldn't put them on camera as much if I was the father, but you know what? Everything we've seen, it looks like he's a great father. But you look at the trade and, Broncos get Russ, and then they get you Wazarike, who was suspended all year for gambling. Essentially. The Seahawks got Drew Lock, who's a backup for them, who's played a couple games. He's been okay. Shelby Harris is already on a different team. Noah Fant's never been worth the first round pick the Broncos spent on him.
Amen to that one.
First round pick Charles Cross last year has been fantastic for Seattle. Boy Mafe has been a pretty solid edge for them. Tyreek Smith hasn't really made an impact. Devin Witherspoon looked like one of the best young defenders in the league, and Derek Hall's yet to prove it as an edge. So the Seahawks got 3.5 quality players out of that trade and instantly went to the playoffs last year on the back of that trade. So obviously you wish for that one back. Maybe it doesn't look that bad now in retrospect that I'm looking at it. But still,
it still hurts a little.
It always felt to me like they wanted Rodgers, and they settled for Russ, and they offered the same package to Seattle at a time where everyone in the league was like, I wouldn't ever trade for Russ, because that's the rumors we were hearing. And, there's a big difference between Russ and Rodgers. And I'm not that much of a Rodgers guy, especially over the last couple of years. But, I mean, one is clearly a better quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. This one will make you happy. The Bears have a brighter future than the Denver Broncos.
It's true.
And in fact, it does feel that way. Oh my goodness, you guys.
Before we wrap, because I know you're out there, What's your biggest Russell Wilson memory of his time in Denver? What's going to stick with you when you think about Russell Wilson in Denver?
Oh, good question. I feel like the hype videos will always be a part of it, but I'm trying to think of like again, this is me going back to quote unquote being emotional about this. Like, I'll never forget being at training camp when Russell Wilson ran out for the first time, and there were literally hundreds of cameras all recording that exact moment, and everybody on the hill was so excited about seeing him run out, and the crowd went crazy, and like that was just one of those moments where Broncos country felt so united, and it was so exciting. But honestly, I think back to of recent, it was after Stidham got the start for the last home game, which was it the Chargers? Was that the last home game?
I believe so. It was like January 1st.
Yeah, and he got the start, and we were in the locker room, and Russell Wilson was at his locker all by himself. And he had already talked, and he had already kind of spoke on the situation. And it was one of those things where like Russ and I had looked at each other, and you could just tell that he was really upset in that moment. But it was just one of those moments where you're like, personally for me, I was lucky enough to just be in the locker room, but seeing somebody who seems always so positive and so sunshine and like everything's going to work out, the world's going to be fine. And you could just tell in the quick 1 second that him and I had like connected, it was just, you could tell he was so sad. And he probably knew in that moment that the time was going to be ending. And I think a lot of us knew that, even though there may have been hope for some Broncos countries or people were ready to move on. Like, those are the two memories, which it just feels like that was the like best moment with Russell Wilson is, oh my gosh, here it is. He's going to save Broncos country. And everybody was so excited. And then seeing him all by himself in his locker on that last game day was, I don't know, that's such like a full circle moment right in itself, you know?
I mean, he went from one of the most positive people in the NFL to just downtrodden. I mean, literally all the horse puns you can make. Let's ride, right?
Let's ride.
But, you know, he was never able to saddle up the Broncos to success. And that's why he is out, and he knew probably that he was going to be out from about week 5 on when that contract dispute thing happened after the Chiefs game, which was his biggest win in Denver. He ended the streak. He ended the streak, and that might be his actual legacy on the football field. But the thing that I will remember, Rachel, is year 1 not only being an utter disaster on the field, but off the field in the antics. The Denver Broncos became a sensation worldwide meme. Never forget the airplane calf stretches. Never forget the Subway commercials. Like we in Denver were being made fun of every single week for something Russ did.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that will stick to me about Russ, is like, it was almost like a cartoon character at a level of just like, this is comical. Like, this isn't a real person. And, you know, there's been a lot of reporting from a lot of different people that is like, Russ is kind of an alien. He's a robot. He doesn't relate to a lot of different people. And you know what? A lot of people that play in the NFL, and we work with some people that play in the NFL, they think a lot differently than the rest of us, because it takes a lot different of a thinker to want to go do that and gladiate for a living.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you see people, like, not to make this about just how celebrities and athletes are very different. I mean, their work ethic is incredible. Like, they do so much. But Usher went and got married after the Super Bowl halftime show. Like, a normal human being probably wouldn't go out there and do that. So yeah, their thinking is totally different. They have to be wired. Think about how many, I mean, Jake, you and I even get it at a certain point of, I say something on video and it goes out on a clip, or you write something and how many people attack you. Like, put that on a much greater scale of being an athlete, and you do have to kind of wire your mind differently to a sense. So it's no fault to who Russell Wilson is. It's going to be interesting to see how his career kind of ends up. If you had to pick right now, is Russell Wilson at a training camp come July for a team?
Not July, but I say he's on a roster by opening day.
Okay.
My question back to you, also looking forward, is Sierra's moving from Denver, so who's going to be our biggest celebrity that lives in the city now?
Oh, it's Nikola Jokic. Oh, I mean, non-athlete, you're saying?
Yeah, because it might be Jokic, even non-athlete.
Yeah, what's Jokic's daughter's name? Listen, she's the princess of Denver.
She's the princess of Denver.
And luckily, we do have two very good sports teams here in the Mile High City, the Denver Nuggets, and hopefully the Colorado Avalanche are able to make a push this year for the playoffs. And we've always got more and plenty of good stuff for denversports.com. So make sure you check it out. I know there's going to be a ton of articles coming out. Jake's been working on some, and he's been sitting here talking with me. So of course we appreciate him, and all of you in the comments, we of course appreciate you.
And our experts, OBT 3:30, stay here.
No, 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, my bad, old time.
go hang out with Cecil and Mace again at 4 o'clock. So don't worry. The Broncos Russell Wilson talk will not be ending anytime soon. And we will see you guys tomorrow morning. For me, 10 a.m. Denver Sports Daily with all the headlines, anything else that's going on. And then back here, probably talking more about Russell Wilson and the Broncos, but who knows? Oh, also, we got the Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets tomorrow. So plenty of stuff. Coffee break. We will see you guys then. Get back to work, everybody, and have a wonderful Monday. Bye, everybody.